Now he had a large written legacy. So he wrote a book called Ahkam al-Quran, what about the rulings connected to the Quran, Naql al-Quran, about how the Quran is written down and how it's transmitted as well, the different riwayat, because the riwayat of preference is Nafi', which is either through Qalun or Warsh. Iman, the discussion about Iman, Al-Mu'tamid, but then when he's got another one called Mukhtasar al-Mu'tamid, so he's actually got a smaller one, because there's Mukhtasar fi Usul al-Din al-Mu'tamid, but there's a smaller one than that. Then there's another one called Al-Muqtabis, which deals with creedal issues. There's Mukhtasar al-Muqtabis, and there's a summary of Mukhtasar al-Muqtabis. Uyun al-Masail, which is a fiqh text. Al-Rada al-Ash'ariyah, okay, which is his answer to Ash'ariyah regarding Ta'wil al-Sifat and the use of Neoplatonist reasoning. Wal-Rada al-Karramiyah, the repudiation of the Karramiyah. Wal-Rada al-Batiniyah, his text, the repudiation of the Batiniyah. Wal-Rada al-Mujassima, okay, his repudiation of the Mujassima. His conclusion is that they're kuffar, which is such a strange thing that today this is a charge that's thrown at him when he's written a kitab on just this topic. وَالرَّدُّ عَلَى Ibn Liban. Rad ala Ibn Liban, who was a man at the time who had some errors in his theology. إبطال تأويلات لأخبار الصفات, right, which is 3 volumes. 2 of them have been published in Arabic, but the 3rd is still in manuscript form. But there's nothing in there that's different to what he said. ومختصر إبطال التأويلات, the summary of إبطال التأويلات. والانتصار للشيخ أبي بكر, the intisar. والكلام في الاستواء, right, where he discusses that istiwa, not capable of being known. والكلام في حروف المعجم والقطع على خلود الكفار في النار. So this book deals with the unbelievers being condemned to the fire for all eternity. وأربع مقدمات في أصول الدينات, right? This is introductory topics to discussion around the foundations of the religion. Now this is important because we have 3 layers when we study the belief of the Muslims. The first is Usuluddin. Usuluddin is the belief in Allah, that he is the creator, the master, the judge. Okay. The second branch of Usuluddin is belief in the messengers, that they've come with revelation, that they brought books and so forth. The third is the belief in resurrection. Okay. That is called Usuluddin. Al-I'tiqad is the tafeel, the detailed matters from Usuluddin. Now, all the cults have Usuluddin, but there's corruptions in their i'tiqad, the more detailed matters. Now, if those detailed matters get to the point where a text is denied or they touch Usuluddin, that particular cultist will not get out of the fire. That's the outcome, right? So you have Usuluddin, i'tiqad, and then you have aqd or uqud or aqa'id, which are doctrines. So those are particular parts of i'tiqad. So let's walk it back then.
Right.
So Usuluddin, belief in Allah as the creator. That's the asl. The i'tiqad is, and I believe in Allah's names and attributes. Okay? The aqd is, Allah is the creator. That's an aqd. Okay? Usuluddin is, we shall be resurrected. Okay? Resurrection is a fact.
Right.
Okay? I'tiqad, the reckoning on the day of resurrection. Aqad, that you'll be given your book in your right hand. That's a particular branch. So they build in that way. So it's important that you understand all these, because people don't systematically study these things in the English-speaking world in this fashion.
Right.
Because we keep people busy making takfir and calling people mujassim and shabiha. We don't study all this stuff. And that's why you'll find that although it mentions all the cults are in the fire, except for the one, because the ultimate outcome is major kufr, because the outcome of what they have will touch on Usuluddin, but not every single one is in the fire. Why? Because the i'tiqad, if they spiritualize a text or they explain it away, but they accept the text, then it's an error in i'tiqad where they're not condemned forever. Or if they misunderstand the text, or if they deny it because they don't know it or they don't understand it, that's different. right? Now, the usul-ud-din are what's known as ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura. This expression is thrown around a lot, known by the religion by necessity. But no one, it seems hazy in people's minds. What's known from the religion by necessity of Islam is the usul-ud-din, which are those three things. And then the salah, that the Muslims must do salah, zakah, fasting, and hajj, those things. The tafasil are the other affairs, and then the aqa'id are the things within that. But you'll notice that as we've gone data down time, people are always talking about what? Aqa'id, individual doctrines.
Right.
Because as the Khalaf age came in, they stopped really dealing with usul-ud-din and i'tiqad properly. That's why it's so important when you saw the change from writing i'tiqad to aqa'id. People started fighting about doctrines rather than the theology. So I'll give another example.
Yes.
Someone comes into Islam. We'll call him Mahmoud, mashallah. So Mahmoud enters the deen. Boom. He confirms the usul-ud-din. I believe in Allah. I believe in the messengers. He said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Boom, I believe it. Okay, so you got the resurrection, you got this, you got that. That's the basic usul-ud-din that he had. Got it. Because it's the same thing that the shepherdess had when she was asked, where's Allah? And she said, Fis sama, above the sky. Who am I? Rasulullah. That's usul-ud-din.
And can we say that the pillars of Iman, that's usul-ud-din?
The pillars of Iman are in the i'tiqad.
All right.
But they're going to filter down. So Mahmoud confirms the usul-ud-din. Okay, boom, I've confirmed them. Okay. Now within the usul-ud-din, he also knows about messengers. But he's never heard of, because he's already said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, but he's never heard of the Prophet Irmiyah. That's i'tiqad. If he denies Irmiyah, he's not kafir. Because by affirming La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, he's affirmed all the other Rusul, although he doesn't know their name. Their names. He's never heard the name Irmiyah, so he's denying it out of ignorance. He's not kafir. Understood?
Yes.
Right? So then you say, okay, listen, the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, we believe in Muhammad, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He says, yes, that's the usul. That's how I came into the deen.
Right.
Okay, all right. He is Rasulullah and the Nabi of Allah. Okay, got it. Then he hears about the splitting of the moon. I never heard of that. That's impossible. The tidal effect and everything. He's denying an aqa'id. That's a doctrine. Right. But he's not kafir because he's already affirmed Muhammad Rasulullah. He may not know that, he hasn't seen it. Right? So, but if he knew about it and denied it, yeah, that would affect usul-ud-din and take him out of the religion. Why? Because he's denying some of the stuff.
Right.
Just like the Mu'tazila is saying the Quran is created. The reason why, one of the principles behind why that's major kufr is the implication. The implication of it, because the implication of it is that Allah's knowledge and his speech is created, which would make him created, which bounds on usul-ud-din. That he's the creator over all, and that he's uncreated, and that his existence is necessarily so without dependence on anyone else. So by denying that, also it's tantamount to that. If you deny a text, necessarily it's major kufr. Why? Because it bounds on usul-ud-din. And that's why when you look at usul-ud-din, all the cults are clear on usul-ud-din. Otherwise, they'd all be murtadeen.
All right.
And you had to kill them all.
SubhanAllah.
But their outcome is major kufr because the implications of what they have is the i'tiqad, the tafasil, which in certain circumstances can impact the usul-ud-din. You understand?
Yeah.
But this started to get blurred in the period of the Khalaf.
SubhanAllah.
They started blurring it. That's why they started writing books of aqidah, such and such, doctrine of such and such, aqa'id, such and such, doctrines. They stopped talking about i'tiqad.
SubhanAllah.
And people used to think I'm splitting hairs when I make a difference in i'tiqad and the aqa'id. But it's not, though. I'm doing this for a reason.
SubhanAllah.
Because the stair-step pattern of usul-ud-din, i'tiqad, and aqa'id, or aqd, right, is important to make that difference because it also affects how you deal with people. So someone's new to Islam, he denies a particular malik. You don't assume he's kafir because he may not have ever heard that name before. But he just affirmed the usul-ud-din. Then he affirmed the i'tiqad. Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi wa yawmil akhir. He affirmed all that.
Okay.
So by affirming them in general, he's affirmed Mikael, although he denied him because I never heard that name before. He already affirmed him in general.
Right.
Now, if he's shown the ayat and the ahadith, and then he denies the ayat of Mikael and Sultan, you see, then it's a problem.
All right. Okay.
You understand?
And if I may ask you, some people,
Yes.
they also do this when they hear about the karama. They say this is impossible.
Yes, because maybe they didn't see an ayah, maybe they didn't see a text, maybe they didn't see a proof on it, and they might not know that karamat is part of the creed. That's why Imam Ahmed said, whoever denies the karamat, he didn't say he's a kafir, he's on dalal.
Subhanallah.
Why? Because it's an aqd.
Subhanallah.
It's an aqd. So he's on dalal.
Wow.
The Mu'tazila, they denied the Al-Isra wal-Miraj. Why? Because they explain it away. Are they kafir for denying Al-Isra? No, they're on dalal for doing that. Why? Because it's an aqd.
Interesting.
Now, if they denied the ayat, which they didn't, they'd be kafirs.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's usul-ud-din now.
So
because you're denying a text.
Right. So when they come off this claim, you read an ayah to them. If they confirm, then they're fine. But if they say no, we reject as well.
That's it. Because if they say, yeah, that ayah is true, but it doesn't mean that. You see, okay, now that's dalal.
Right.
Or if you spiritualize it, you say, oh yeah, that ayah has no. Or if they say, oh yes, the names and attributes of Allah, they're all metaphorical. Okay, that's kufr. Because that's bounding on the usul-ud-din.
Wow, subhanAllah.
Because it's bounding on, because it's almost saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a metaphor. Okay, that's major kufr. That's bounding on usul-ud-din. See, not everything a cult has may be major kufr. There's aspects to them that's why they're condemned. But there's also aspects that are dalal. And so because they're dalal, they're not necessarily kafir in that area, but they are astray because they're not denying the texts. And that's why the impediments of takfir, now that we understand this, now the impediments of takfir become more clear. On why sometimes Ahmed, you have the Jahmiyyah, he's saying in one instance, the Jahmiyyah are kuffar, a'da' Allah, murtadeen. But then you have another instance, he's praying behind some of them. Why? Impediments of takfir, and how bad is the situation of those particular ones? Did it reach usul-ud-din? Did it reach i'tiqad or aqa'id? He's thinking about all these things. That's why his book is called Kitab al-i'tiqad, not Kitab al-aqa'id.
MashaAllah.
Because Kitab al-i'tiqad is the tafasil from the usul-ud-din. That's why it's called Usul-Sunnah. That was the first, hey, you all got to be good at this.
Wow.
Kitab al-i'tiqad is coming right after that. See, this is important. And Imam Al-Qadi rahimahullah is trying to make sure that line doesn't get blurred. So he talks about these matters again, because in that time it's getting blurred. Because people are fighting about aqa'id without knowing the usul-ud-din and the i'tiqad. Because some of these people have been re-steeped in philosophy.
If I'm asking one thing about the issue of takfir, so the cults, where did they exactly go wrong with this issue?
Well, the cults will go wrong in i'tiqad. And listen, if you have bad i'tiqad, you'll have bad aqa'id. Because the doctrines, the aqa'id come out of the i'tiqad.
Right.
So if you say, okay, listen, the Quran is the speech of Allah, but it's created. What? Yeah, because everything is just created and so and so. So now that's the i'tiqad that you have about the books of Allah. That then gives you bad aqa'id, bad doctrines. Because then that will reflect on that individual prophet regarding what he received. So then they say, yes, when Allah spoke to Nabi Musa, he created some speech in the bush, and the bush spoke. Allah didn't speak to him. He created something in the bush, a voice that spoke to him. See, that's a bad aqd. But it came from bad i'tiqad.
Wow.
Which, depending upon the circumstance, can be kufr and usul-ud-din.
Right.
But they're not. But you see, what's happened right now in the English, they're not teaching these things.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And so because of this, people are like, okay, well, this guy said this, he's necessarily kafir or whatever. No, there's impediments to takfir, and there's reasons why these things happen. And that's why you don't say each and every Mu'tazili is kafir. Do you understand now? Each and every Shia is not kafir, because the aqa'id or the part of i'tiqad, did it affect it? Well, that will depend on the individual. Yes, now the end result, if you follow those things to the end result, yeah, that will take you to the fire. Either permanently or for a period of time to get burned off. But each and every single individual, that's why people misunderstand the statement of Al-Baghdadi. Every dalala and every mudil is in the fire. Yes, when it's confirmed that he's a mudil that needs to be in there. Yes, the dalala is in the fire. Yeah, that's where it belongs. And every mudil, yes. But it doesn't mean every mudil is in there forever. Or that threat applies to every mudil. That's why it says every dalala and mudil, both of them together. He's both dalal and he's on the dalala and he's mudil by it. So there'll be some people who are on dalal, but they're not mudil. Because the understanding that they had became corrupted, they were interpreting, or they were ignorant, or they were all these different things. Then there's some people that are on dalal and they're mudil. And then they're leading other people astray. Willfully. And based upon that, they'll be in the fire for all eternity or for a period of time based upon the conditions. But these have to be established based on, is it usuluddin, i'tiqad, or aqa'id, is based upon these things. But this doesn't get discussed in English speaking world.
Right, of course.
Because people are too busy doing tafseem, tabdi', tafsiq, and all such stuff. So people aren't getting anywhere. They're making takfir on whole generations of scholars, and then by default, accidentally making takfir on al-Qurun, which can make you a kafir. Which we're back in Usul again, that can make you a kafir. Because you could be denying texts because it's confirmed that the best generation, my generation, those who come next, and those who come next, they're like, no, they don't know. They're mujassim or they're mushib. That can make you a kafir. Why? Because the hadith we quoted before, that how people were given by doing tabarruk with their presence and with them, they were given a victory. By mentioning, is there someone here who met Rasulullah? Yes, and they were given victory. There's someone who met someone who met. Is there someone who met someone who met someone else? Yes. It was all the way up to the 33 generations. You can't do tabarruk with something unless it's safe and has barakah in and of itself and it's mubarak, which means they're all Jannah bound. So you say, oh no, they didn't know. Or they're mujassima and they're carrying the same thing and what was carried before, that can make you a kafir.
Right.
But because you're interpreting or spiritualizing, or the person that taught you this is ignoring his own doctrines, his own aqa'id, his own elders, his own people that taught him, because they're ignoring that, well, you're exempt because you don't understand what you're doing.
Right.
Well, we hope you're exempt. We don't know what your inward is. We hope you are. Because our thing is, okay, you're either a kafir or you're an idiot. We hope you're an idiot.
Right.
We really do. Because it's all right, listen, man, you're an idiot. You're not going in. You didn't know any better, man. Or you're an idiot. You're going in for a little while. Burn some of that sin off you. Whatever. So this is important.
Just one question. What is actually the reasoning for making group takfir on Ahl Bid'ah on the cults?
Because the outline of them is it leads to that. That's why the Rasulullah, he said, had I lived to the time where the Khawarij come out, I would have killed them as the people of Ad. Now that hadith in Bukhari Muslim, that's general takfir. Because that's the outcome, because they're rebelling against Allah's command, and by default they're rebelling against La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. They're changing that by default, although there's individuals within them. Right? So when you're looking at it, this goes back to the ruling of the person according to his group and the person according to himself. Right. So there's the person, and this is stuff we had to learn this in Kitab Hukm Murtad. We had to learn this. And it's in the Divine Lightning. The reprint is out there. It's in there. That stuff is there. So you have the person who's Muslim by himself, and he's Muslim according to his group. That's the Sahaba, the first generation. Then you have the person that's Muslim by himself, but he's kafir according to his group. And that's what happened to Al-Abbas and the Muslims who were forced into the army of the Kuffar to beef up their numbers in the Battle of Badr. Because you can't tell who's Muslim and who's not. So they were fought as Kuffar, not because you think the Muslims are Kuffar, but you had to fight them as it was. It's the same thing when you see Muslims in Kafir armies willingly going in and killing people. They're Muslim by the group, but Kafir according to their group, although they might be Muslim individually. Right? Then you have the one who's Kafir by himself, but he's Muslim according to his group. That's the Munafiqun. We can't see him.
Subhanallah.
Second page of Surah Al-Baqarah. We can't see him. It's hidden. Then there's the one who's Kafir by himself and Kafir by his group. Well, we know that that's the Kafir.
Right.
And the Ahkam get adjusted based upon that. Now, within the Khawarij are those classes of people. Within the Mu'tazila are those classes of people. And sometimes those people become, they reveal themselves, or something happens where they do reveal their hukam on themselves as an individual. But as a group, they're kuffar because of what they've done and the long outcome of their beliefs. Because when the aqa'id are wrong, the aqa'id point to bad i'tiqad. And bad i'tiqad can point to usuluddin being defective, which is the reason that you're Muslim. So when the Rasulullah says that they are the dogs of the fire, or when he says, I would have killed them like the people of Ad, or when he says the Qadariyah are mujusu hadhihi al-ummah, they're the majus of this ummah. Fire worshippers are kuffar, akhi.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, of course they are. What's that mean? Does that mean every single Qadari? No. But the hukam, the outcome, belongs to that. Or man waqqara sahiba bid'atin faqad aana ala hadm al-Islam. Whoever gives shelter to or honors someone of innovation, he's helped to destroy Islam. The hadith in Imam these collections, or the famous one, for the one of innovation and desires, there's no salah for him, no zakah for him, no hajj for him. Don't visit him when he's ill, and don't pray over him when he dies. These are general texts, but they do apply to some people.
Right.
But because people aren't studying these things in the English people, it's just leading to this. And then you have the sighar tulabat al-ilm. You have the midgets, or these sughayr from the students of knowledge who aren't taking up their proper sighar, like the proper midgets, like they're little children, afrakh, they're like little chicks. So you have the chickens, then you have the chicks that hatch from the eggs. That's them. And so they're taking from another farah, they're taken from other afrakh because they don't sit for the knowledge. That's why you'll find these people, they specialize in these things, but they don't memorize mutun.
Right.
They don't memorize Quran. But they know that you're a kafir or a mujassim or mushabbih, but you never hear them, you never hear about them leading Salat al-Tarawih. You never hear it. You never hear about them memorizing mutun. You never hear about them teaching Bukhari and Muslim, but they know Ibn Arabi's astray.
Right.
But they know istiwa means istawla. But they know that yadain means qudratain. But they know that, but they don't memorize. They haven't finished the Quran. I'm telling you, akhi, if you have this type of thinking, Allah will never give you success in memorizing mutun or the book of Allah, because your heart is busied in other things. You'll never have that success. You just never have it. And it's Muslim brothers in the English speaking world, in a lot of senses, have been sabotaged by these sighar that aren't really who they say they are, because in the Muslim heartland countries, there are nobodies there.
Right.
They're flat out nobodies.
Exactly.
And they teach brothers that have gone over here with good intent, but the brothers didn't use their discernment. So they get poisoned. Then they come back here and they poison their congregations again. And that's the reality. So in looking at the continuation of his books, we have أربع مقدمات في أصول الديانات, which we already discussed, the 4 introductions to foundational principles of religion. وإثبات إمامة الخلفاء الأربعة, the establishment and proof of the imamship of the 4 khulafa. This is an answer to the 12ers. The innocence of Muawiyah. He wrote a book on Muawiyah radiallahu anhu because people were cursing Muawiyah and things like this. وَالرِّسَالَةِ فِي إِمَامِ الْوَقْتِ. A message regarding the Imam of the time, because the 12ers believe in every era there's some type of Imam of the age, and he's in occultation. And because by this time, Allama Hilli had, because the 12er theology, the complete theology, was not fully crystallized until this time. So when it was crystallized, it's so amazing that this stuff was happening on Al-Qadi at this time. The moment it was crystallized, he wrote against it.
MashaAllah.
In particular, this issue, right? Answers and questions regarding Al-Masjid al-Haram, answers and questions about forgetting parts of the Salah, what you should do, answers and questions about the same sect and different cults, answers and questions that have come from Asfahan. Then he's got a book called Al-Uddatu fi Usul al-Fiqh, the Udda fi Usul al-Fiqh. ومختصر العدة, summary of the Udda. Al-Kifaya fi Usul al-Fiqh. He's got another one in ومختصر الكفاية, summary of al-Kifaya. Al-Ahkam us-Sultaniyyah. Now what this deals with is how to set up Muslim governance in your area.
Oh.
So he sent this to Qadis, listen, because when they came to a new area, they need to set up cities, they need to do other stuff. Okay, this is how you do it. This is how we've done it. This is how you do it. It's extremely detailed.
And a brief question, up to who is it to establish this?
Okay, so establishing Khilafah is the job of the Ahl al-Halli wal-Aqad, which is the Maraji', or the living Khalifa gives it to someone else, or someone takes over and he's declared Khalifa, right? With regards to the Shar, an area can be an imara in which people have been commanded to set it up, or if an area was turned into Dar al-Kufr when it had been Dar al-Islam, and the people rise up and turn it back into Dar al-Islam, right? This can be done by them, but they'll need assistance in setting up Qudat and if they've spent some time without Qadis, without Muftis, if they've been wiped out, they'll need to have send a letter to the Maraji' or Qadis to have them send people to set things up after they've put things together.
So the Ahkam al-Sultaniyyah is not for the laity as today's people trying to claim.
No, you wouldn't necessarily grab it and say, all right, I'm going to establish this, because if now, let's say you were in a country where it had been, like, for example, Kazan in Russia, the people there identify as atheists. They were Muslim, but in the time of Abdul Qadir al-Badran, who died 1346, they were Muslim, but when the riba and everything else came in, they apostated. They identify as not religious. The masjids are all museums there. But let's say there was some type of tajdeed that happened, and they rose up and said, all right, that's it now. We're Muslim and we want to be ruled by the revealed law, and they took over. Okay, great. You've made it Dar al-Islam, but you need help now. You can't do it yourself.
Right.
You need qadis, you need muftis, you need to start sending out letters. Sheikh, what do? We don't know what to do about this. We don't know what to do about that. Our economy's wrecked because we destroyed all the banks. This has happened. We killed all of our leaders. So we don't know what to do. Or the army said they'll be with us, but they're confused about the whole Shar thing. We don't know what to do. Do we got to fight the army now? Right. All these types of things. It's not necessarily for you and I to be in Wales and to be like, okay, that's it now. We're setting up somewhere. Because that's a different question now. Because we're entered into a different area. Right. Then we have Wafada'il Ahmed, the virtues of Imam Ahmed, Mukhtasar fi Siyam, a summary in Siyam, wa Ijab al-Siyam Laylat al-Imam, an answer regarding the compulsory nature of Sawm on cloudy days. Muqaddimah fil Adab, so he wrote on Adab. Wa Kitab al-Tib, this is a book on medicine. So he wrote on the importance of medicine, different types of medicine for curing different things, tinctures as well as herbs. Kitab al-Libas, different types of clothing, because there's certain ahkam about it being disliked to mix certain fibers and things like that. He clears up a lot of these issues because some people are saying it's haram, like the children of Israel, which is their principle among them is known as shatnaz, which is impermissible absolutely to mix fabrics. He said that's not true. The hadith on mixing fabrics is disliked. It's better if you didn't, but you don't bear any sin if you do, right? Well, amr al-ma'ruf, right? Enjoining the right. Shurut ahl al-dhimma. This is the ruling regarding the people that are under jizya. Wa tawakkul, book on tawakkul. Dhamm al-ghina, the dangers of singing with wind and string instruments. Al-ikhtilaf al-dhabih, The difference of opinion in zabih, because the majority of the Muslims are saying that the one that Nabiyuna Ibrahim alayhi salam mentioned in Surah Al-Safat as sacrificing was Nabiyuna Ismail alayhi salam. But some people say it was Nabiyuna Ishaq alayhi salam. He clears up a lot of these issues because there's a branch theological issue that gets impacted by that position. Tafdeel al-faqr al-ghina, the preference of poverty over being rich. Fadl Laylatul Jum'ah ala Laylatul Qadr, the rank of Jum'ah over Laylatul Qadr, which I translated and put on the blog.
Yes.
People loved that thing. I didn't know it was going to get the response it got, but people loved that. تكذيب خيابرة فيما يدعون من إسقاط الجزية, the rejection of the deceived ones who claim that jizya has been lifted. Right. إبطال الحيل, right, the nullification of those taking omens. الفرق بين الآن والأهل, the difference between when you call someone al versus ahl. Like, what does that mean, the hukm al-shar? Because there's al Muhammad, there's al al-bayt and ahl al-bayt, and there's a subtle distinction between that. والمجرد في المذهب, this is a really slim manual in Hanbali fiqh. الشرح الخرقي, he's got a sharh, Imam al-Khiraqi. كتاب الروايتين, whenever there's two narratives in the madhhab, he resolves them. It says the dominant narrative is this. قطعة من الجامع الكبير, branch of الجامع الكبير, فيها الطهارة وبعض الصلاة والنكاح والصداق والخلع والوليمة والطلاق. Right, so that's what's in الجامع الكبير, where he covers tahara, some of salah, nikah, bridal gift, khula, walima, and talaq. Al-Jami' al-Saghir, okay, is a really amazing book. I have that book. It goes from the Book of Waters to the end, and he just really breaks down a lot of points, resolves a lot of issues, disputes that are there. And this is another thing. The madhahib are agreed upon between 85 to 90% of masail. Okay. Then within that are between 10 and 15% that they are not. Now, within that 10 to 15%, there are things that are still open. They haven't been looked at yet because there's other areas that are being treated that are more. But what will happen in every era is some of those issues will be closed or they'll be resolved. So there'll be council meetings where they'll sit and they'll resolve them. So in Al-Jami' al-Saghir, Imam Al-Qadi resolved, I think, like 10 issues. Right? It's like, okay, this is closed now. They're like, okay, it's closed. Right? And that then gets handed down the line. Then you have Sharh al-Madhhab, right, which is another fiqh book. Well, Khisal wal-Aqsam, okay, when people make oaths and how to fix them. Right? He also has Al-Khilaf al-Kabir, the difference of opinion among all the madhhabs. Right? He has books that have to do with research, how to go about researching. So it's called Kitab al-Nazar, how to research, how to examine research. How do you go about coming to a conclusion on something? Right? How do you reach a conclusion on something so that you know how to read correctly? And it's part of that stuff that I've taken for a series that I'm building on how to read a book. Right? So all these things he built up in his written legacy. And he had a tremendous written legacy, as we can see. You know, I didn't want to belabor the point too much with those things, but he has a tremendous written legacy with regard to those affairs and what he accomplished.